Hello everyone, this is V Harper from supermaster.com, and in case you can't hear it, I'm quite sick. But I'm not going to let that stop me from reviewing 2000's Roland Emmerich opus, The Patriot. Ooh, this movie. My earliest memory of this film happens to be when it first came out. This was back when I was in year 12, so I was just about to leave school. And I think The Patriot came out around mid that year, mid-2000. So, yeah, it caused quite a stir amongst my classmates. I remember hearing all sorts of members of the cohort saying, you know, see The Patriot, it is so good. Mel Gibson is so good in The Patriot. And I didn't actually get to see the film on the cinema. I actually waited until it came on DVD. And in a sense, in retrospect, I'm glad I did. Look, they say this film is based on historical events, and by they I mean the makers of the movie, but to me, it's not based on historical events so much more than, say, what the revolution is according to Roland Emmerich. And according to Roland Emmerich, the Americans were completely victorious and all the British people were bad, bad, bad people. And that is reflected in Mel Gibson's role. I'm not going to say anything about Mel Gibson and what I think of him as an individual, but I do feel as an actor, he is definitely one of the most strongest actors out there still, and he still remains a major box office draw. So most of the power of The Patriot does come from Gibson's casting, even though it's still got itself a good sort of a role of performers. You have Heath Ledger in his breakout role, Cheikh Carroll, Jason Isaacs, more on him later, and Jolie Richardson. So here's the thing. Half of Gibson's career has been built upon his particular character. That being, in no particular order, a good guy who was wronged, goes bonkers, and goes on a bloody rampage without any sort of repercussions coming back to bite him in the ass in the long run. And The Patriot is no exception. So Benjamin Martin, who Gibson plays in this movie, is a good guy because his former slaves choose to work for him. He has 5 children, he prays, he has a deceased wife who he talks to every day in her tombstone, opposes all bad things, but then he does like one really horrendous thing and he goes insane. He actually coerces his younger sons to go what is on essentially a suicide mission to rescue Ledger's character, and also in revenge for gunning down one of his older yet sort of younger sort of sons. So yeah, Benjamin Martin is like the father of the year, isn't he? And he also finds himself shacking up with Jolie Richardson's character, who also happens to be his sister-in-law. Ew. But look, before I go into more of the negatives, I've got to say, The Patriot still does look like a very splendid movie. It's got some really great battle scenes and choreography, fantastic costumes, and overall, it's got itself a really good cast. I don't remember disliking any of them, and I'm thankful that the film can somewhat rest on that particular blessing. Because if this film had none of those actors, or no actor who has enough charisma, this one would have bombed dramatically. It would have been flushed down the toilet and it would never have been spoken of ever again. So, okay, where to start? Look, Mel Gibson is a decent actor and he does what he can with this material, but I really do find that The Patriot is his version of a vanity project. Benjamin Martin can go out and do all this stuff, but unless the story says something in particular about his actions, he is never punished. Yes, well, another one of his sons bite the dust, and yes, he finds himself deeper than he originally anticipated. But in the end of the film, it all wraps up very well. Like, the revolution is a couple of years away from being won, but already those Brits are on the hightail, and General Cornwallis, played by Tom Wilkinson. He's been made a huge fool of, and nobody ever hears from him ever again. He lives in disgrace, which is not exactly how history panned out. Quite the opposite. It still took some time before the revolution won out in the colony's favour. Now, this is coming from somebody who's a complete armchair historian. I have no in-depth knowledge of American history, because I'm Australian, and therefore I'm very, very racist and obnoxious. But the fact of the matter is that this film is a highly idealised view of the revolution. And in saying that, the treatment of the period, or rather specifically the people, really does bring this film down. For example, as I said, Gibson's workers, who happen to be African American, work for him by choice. They are not his slaves, they are not his property. But throughout the rest of the movie, there is no explicit mention of those who are in slavery. There is no sort of portrayals of mistreatment of human beings in this movie, other than the redcoats being, gunned down and that sort of stuff. It's very, very black and white. There is no nuance, there is no consideration for how that part of American history panned out. And I get it. Slavery is an ugly thing, but the fact of the matter is that this happened. And for it to be swept under the rug like it is in this movie, that is pretty unforgivable. It's a huge controversial subject, but I feel it still bears to be talked about, because slavery still happens these days. It is still a humongous problem in the world. And the more people try to ignore it, the more powerful that tyrannical juggernaut becomes. It's a terrible thing, but this is something that we need to talk about. And the Patriot just skims over it as if it never happened. And I'm just thinking, granted, I didn't hear anything in particular regarding this when it came out, but in retrospect, I wouldn't have been surprised if there was a humongous uproar against this movie and how it portrayed the lack of slavery in a time that was infamous for something like that. So, this movie. But I gotta say, even though the character is completely one-dimensional and there is absolutely everything textbook about him on paper, Jason Isaacs does the best job he possibly could with Colonel Tabington. He is an absolute monster. He is a piece of trash. And that's thanks to no small part to Dean Devlin's admittedly third grader writing, because once again, good, bad. Colonel Tabington is bad. He shoots the vulnerable Americans. He shoots basically anyone who is defiant towards him. He's very stubborn with his superiors. He talks back to them. He has no regard for human life, basically. And he actually explicitly goes against Cornwallis's wishes when it comes to gentlemanly conduct, because Cornwallis is trying to influence his men to have a sense of civility in the war, because the way he sees it, when the war is won by the British, that means avenues are going to be reopened between the colonies and the Brits. So he wants to try and lessen the blow of the war by trying to enforce parley and mercy and that sort of thing. Tabington doesn't like that. He completely goes against those wishes, and you really get a sense that he gets off on the bloodlust. He is a sadist. And if I'm not mistaken, this was also the film that Jason Isaacs got his big break. So you got Heath Ledger, rest in peace, and then you got Jason Isaacs, and both of them play mortal enemies in this movie. It's a very sort of it is a pretty silly role, but Isaacs is a talented actor, and he does what he can with the material. And I feel he is the best part about this movie. I'm not kidding. I'm not letting my lusty love heart eyes getting in the way. He genuinely does earn a sense of watchability about him. You can't look away from him when he's on the screen. Yeah. The Patriot is not historically sensitive. It has absolutely no regard for the people of the time, be it, you know, the Americans or the British. It is very stupid, and in a sense it is quite offensive. But would I say, is it as offensive as, say, Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay? Oh, well, it's been some time since I've seen Pearl Harbor. Quite frankly, that movie really did bore me, but I don't think it's any worse than that, but I frankly couldn't blame anybody for thinking this movie is horrendous in every which way. But from a visual standpoint, and from the particular set of actors called upon in this movie, you could do a lot worse, even though you could definitely do a lot better. So I give The Patriot a 2.5 out of 5. I feel I am being quite generous by giving it that. And yeah, oh, by the way, if I have made any sort of historical discrepancy in this video, please let me know. I guess I could go, you know, reading online about it, but I wouldn't know where to begin. So if any of you wonderful folks out there who know your American history can, you know, teach me a couple of things, leave a comment in the boxes below and I'll read them. And I'll keep them in mind next time. Thank you very much, guys, and once again, take care of yourselves and each other. And pray for me, because I feel really sick. Bye-bye, guys.